Australia. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we are a pretty diverse nation. We celebrate blending and additions of cultures in a thing called multiculturalism. It means that we can experience the world without travelling it. It's a great thing that improves our nation, our economy, and our views. But there is one thing that many Australians are united against. It's a pretty big issue in our country at the moment, and it's one of the few debates that can actually unite both sides of Australian politics. It is an issue of human rights. In the end, it is actually our response to a desperate call for help. It is our response to asylum seekers arriving by boat. There is a distinct ignorance of this issue in Australia. Many people believe that boat people are illegals, queue jumpers, and that they are going to take over Australia and turn it into something terrible. But none of that is true. An asylum seeker is someone who has left their country and is seeking the protection of another country. They are claiming that it is unsafe to return to their homeland because of imminent danger to themselves for reasons such as their gender, race, political views, or religion. And because of this danger, they want to live in a different, safe country, like Australia. Asylum seekers can arrive by air, sea, or land. However, in Australia, we seem to only be concerned with irregular maritime arrivals, or colloquially, boat people. Contrary to popular beliefs in the Australian population, seeking asylum in Australia is not illegal. It is a basic human right. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. And Australia has agreed to the United Nations Treaty stating, the contracting states shall not impose penalties on refugees who enter or are present in their territory without authorization. We are required by our international agreements to accept and welcome asylum seekers, but because of some inhumane policy, Australia is not living up to this requirement. For some reason, people think that boat people are all people smugglers, that they are only here to use Australia's economy. However, 9 out of 10 boat arrivals are found to be genuine refugees, whereas only 5 out of 10 asylum seekers who arrive by air are found to be real refugees. Asylum seekers who arrive in Australia by boat come mostly from the Middle East, with the most from Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Iraq, and also from Sri Lanka. But there are also a lot of asylum seekers who identify as without a nationality. They are overwhelmingly male, and 2/3 of all arrivals are under 30. People say that asylum seekers should just wait their turn in the queue to avoid tragic deaths at sea, but the reality is that there is no orderly queue for asylum seekers. So many people are concerned that Australia is being overrun by boat people, but that's simply a lie. In the 2012-2013 financial year, 26,500 asylum seekers arrived in Australia. For context, that's about 1/3 of ANZ Stadium, and only 2/3 of those arrivals came by boat. Compare that to the 44,000 New Zealanders who were granted permanent settler status in Australia the year before. Are we concerned about being overrun by New Zealanders? Asylum claims in Australia only account for about 1.5% of Australia's total migration. But how does that compare to the rest of the world? Well, the answer is pretty poorly. In the same year that Australia received just 18,000 asylum applications by boat, there were 23,000 people forced to leave their homes every day. Australia's intake of asylum seekers is only about 1.5% of the world, and in 2011, when there were 11,500 asylum claims in Australia, Italy received 52,000 claims, Germany had 45,000 claims, and there were 74,000 claims in the United States. If a friend of yours was forced to leave their country out of a fear of death, would you expect them to be welcomed into Australia? Because they wouldn't be. Australia has a policy called mandatory detention, where you are locked up without charge or trial. The average stay duration in detention centres in Australia is 275 days. That's 9 months. If you arrived in Australia on Easter Sunday, you would still be in detention for Christmas and New Year's. Detention centres are closed facilities with no freedom, and they are physically, emotionally, and psychologically damaging. But that's only if you arrive by air. Those in immigration detention centres are the lucky ones. As of October 2012, if you arrive in Australia by boat and claim asylum, you will never see Australia. You will be shipped to Nauru or Manus Island in Papua New Guinea, which Australia has deemed regional processing centres. That sounds well and good, but what it means is you will be placed in detention indefinitely. At the end of 2013, only one of the 1,000 asylum seekers held on Manus Island had been processed. Australia is handing off its asylum seekers to other countries in the hope that putting the problem out of sight will magically solve the problem. We're expecting other countries to process our arrivals and are paying over $500,000 a year per asylum seeker as they wait for assessment. The only reason that Australia has such an inhumane asylum seeker policy is because the Australian people have asked for it. Ignorance of the issue has led to poor decisions, and learning about the real issue is the only way to change these decisions. At the end of the day, boat people are just that. They are people, and that is something that is often forgotten. The Australian people have a decision to make. Will we live in blissful ignorance, ignoring the call for help? Or will we step up to the challenge and make Australia a safe and free land for all?